I have one question right now. You told that in the process of fertilization, after it was fertilized, the egg covers with a membrane, like a granule membrane, to prevent
Yes.
other sperm cells. And aren't identical twins born from one egg cell?
Yes, it is true, but the thing is, so the first oocyte, fertilized oocyte, so it becomes the zygote, and the zygote divides into two cells. And these two cells, they are totipotent cells, so they can become everything. So the neurons, so their offspring, they can become neurons, the epithelial tissue, etc., etc. So if on this stage, these two separate cells, if they choose to develop into the individual organisms, they will become the identical twins. But usually it just divides further, twice each of these cells, and both of them become the parts of the single organism. So there are some mutations that I don't really know that allow these two cell stage become two mature separate organisms. But
So
in
they will
general,
share. Oh, sorry.
yes.
So they will share one placenta, right? Identical twins. But there are cases where twins don't share the placenta. They are still from one egg, right?
You mean the non-identical ones, right?
Yes, non-identical.
So this happens when the problem of the ovulation happens. So the single cell, single oocyte usually blocks other oocytes to ovulate. And if two of them ovulate at the same time, they both can be fertilized. And in this case, we have non-identical twins. That's why they do not look alike. They really are different.
But if you don't have twins in your heritage, you can't get twins, right?
So it's not true because
it's not true.
Yes, so it might be the external factors like the radiation, for example. So in the USSR, after the 1986, so whenever the Chernobyl happened, a lot of families, they had actually twins. And it really led to this spike of the twin borns, okay? And it might be related to some chemicals, to the mutations in the genome, and to the physical factors. So,
but like without the without this external factors,
irradiation,
radiation, having twins is just a mutation, like a possibility.
It might be related to mutation. So again, let's say that during the ovulation, the mother had, I'm not really sure about these factors. So, but let's assume that alcohol might actually influence these twins, identical twin birth. So in this case, if she, let's say that it really strikes these oocytes, so she drank it and she never had the twins in her heritage, so in her past generations, and she could bring these children. So it really depends on many factors.
Does it always depend on a woman? Because the male doesn't really bring anything to make twins.
If it is related to the genome, it might come from the father side.
Oh, okay.
Can I add to this question, to your answer?
Yes,
so,
for sure.
apparently for okay, so for example, when a woman gets pregnant, so in order like there can be some other factors except genetics, and it is known as epigenetics. It means like something that is related from the outside of genetics. So it can be, as Radmir said, lifestyle. Also, it can be some environmental issues also, and the other thing is nutrition. So depending on these things, on the combination of these things, and also genetics, there is a possibility to get twins as well. And also, like from the how it's called, echo, like, you know, from the artificial fertilization. Yes, thank you. So it's possible also to get monozygotic or dizygotic twins.
Fertilization.
Yeah. So it also depends on the external factors, not only on the genetics of or the woman, but also on the male's side as well. Okay. But however, epigenetics, it depends only on the condition of the oocytes. So that's what I wanted to add.
So my question is, to what extent this in vitro fertilization or ECO is a healthy way of conceiving a child, and will this child have consequences because it's not a natural way of conceiving, you know?
So there are a lot of projects, the research projects, that try to identify what are the consequences of the in vitro fertilization. So ECO is in Russian, so it's extracorporальное оплодотворение, and in English it's IVF. And a lot of people, just because it started in 60s and 70s, nowadays we can have the material to work with, and it's not material, it's actually patients and individuals that we can study and identify if there are problems with their health and the behavioral stuff, etc. So, of course, because it's not the natural way of fertilization, it might bring a lot of consequences. First of all, the huge deregulation of the processes. And again, so whenever the fertilization happens, it should be controlled by the estrogen and progesterone levels from the mother organism. And if you take the mother organism, it is again the yellow body or corpus luteum. And this corpus luteum, it reacts to all the changes of the environment and also the internal changes, and it regulates these levels of the hormones, and we cannot achieve this very fine tuning. So it's always related to a lot of risks, and that's why we actually try to implant a lot of these fertilized eggs if they were fertilized in vitro. And it usually means that this person might have up to 7 children in the same uterus, and many of these embryos, they will die, but usually they have 2 to 3 child to born, okay? And again, so just because now we have a lot of these children who were from these IVF, we can study all the problems with the health and with their behavior. But it is kind of difficult to distinguish what actually brought the possible diseases, etc., because they live in the same environment as usual people. They might have kind of higher chance or higher risk of developing some of these diseases, but it might also be related to the harsher conditions. So let's say that they were working on the factories, and they were exposed to these pathogens more than others. So it's kind of, we really need a lot of data to find the rules that orchestrate this data. And before that, it is kind of speculative to talk about the consequences of the IVF. But for sure, it's not natural way. And because it's not natural, it might bring some disturbance to the process of the development, okay?
Sorry, regarding this topic, like when we started at school, for example, it was told that we can choose the healthy cells to like reproduce, and even this function we have, the having healthy child is very chance is very low, I guess. Yeah.
Again, please, what chances are very low?
Like birth of healthy child.
So if the parents had some mutations that might lead to the problems with the health, so some inherited diseases, of course, the IVF is the method that should be preferred, and it is because we really can identify these cells without these mutations. And in this case, of course, the parents will have higher chance of having a child who is healthy. But again, so a lot of factors are involved in the healthy development of the embryo and of the human in this case. So we cannot control all of them, but because we could control the mutation that leads to the very bad conditions, like the genetical disorders, in this case, we choose this method because it brings better consequences than the normal or natural way of fertilization.
Okay, thank you. Also, I have one question. In the lecture, you said that during the breastfeeding, the ovum cells will not produced. That will. Okay, is it right? I mean.
Yes, it is right, because a lot of hormones are involved in the milk production, and these hormones, they further stimulate the progesterone and prolactin, and these two hormones, they actually block the ovulation. So whenever we have the pregnancy of 9 months and the breastfeeding, during this period of time, the woman should not have the menstruations.
Like I've heard many times that the more women produce egg cells, the less likely it is to produce a baby in the future. Like, is it true? And does it have something to do with the sex hormones?
Okay, so I guess, well, so they produce egg cells during the embryogenesis, and then they only die or being ovulated. So after the birth, after the birth, we have about 1 million, and then by the time of puberty, the woman will have about 300,000 egg cells, from which about 400 will be ovulated, and others will die. And if the woman is getting pregnant very early on this fertility stage or fertility period, it will have higher chances of the bearing the healthy child. And if they didn't have this pregnancy during their lifetime, and in late 40s they decide to have a baby, they will need to kind of extract these leftovers of the oocytes, and in this case they will have some problems about fertilization of these eggs. So the thing about these ovulations is that under the normal conditions, ovulation happens only once in a month, and only one egg is being ovulated. And if we increase the number of cells ovulated at the same time, of course, the woman will run out of the resources. So instead of 200 after 200 months, it will have much less, right? And in this case, of course, it will lead to further problems with the fertilization later on. But usually under the normal conditions, we only ovulate one egg at a time. So it means that the fertility period is kind of divided equally.
And also, do men have such kind of like problems?
Problems with the fertility? Yes, they do. So the older they become, the more mutations their spermatocytes accumulate. And it means that the more mutation will appear in the spermatozoa. And in this case, so the healthiest time is the first 20 years of the fertility. And then it gradually goes down. So in women, it goes with a steeper graph. In men, it just slowly gets down. But it doesn't mean that men will always have healthy children, etc. It just means that they prolong their fertility period.
Good morning. Good afternoon, Professor.
Good afternoon.
May I ask you one question concerning female reproductive hormones? I wanted to clarify about hypothalamus. You said that the one hormone will activate the production of follicle stimulating hormone and lutein hormone, and then they will how can I say make they will produce estrogen, yes, and then this rise of estrogen will stimulate surge in lutein hormone, or how? I have some questions. Like, I think that I misunderstood this point.
Yeah, so the estrogens and progesterones, they are produced in the woman body, okay? And the luteinizing hormone and the follicle stimulating hormone, they are produced in the hypophysis, so it is in very close to your brain. And in men, both of these hormones, so the follicle stimulating hormone and the luteinizing hormone, they are controlling the male gonads. So the follicle stimulating hormone, it initiates the spermatogenesis, and the luteinizing hormone, it stimulates the testosterone production. So there are no cells or very few cells in the man's body that produce the progesterone and estrogen, and they are not controlled by the follicle stimulating hormone or the luteinizing hormone. Okay.
No. I wanted to ask about female, like in females.
Okay, so female. In females, the follicle stimulating hormone, it stimulates the ovulation, which means that, not stimulates, but initiates the ovulation, which means that the rise of the hormone, of this follicle stimulating hormone, kind of pushes the pool of these oocytes to choose one to be ovulated. And after it's been ovulated, the place that it was maturing at, it becomes the corpus luteum, which is the yellow body. And this yellow body is sensitive to the luteinizing hormone. And this luteinizing hormone, it strikes this yellow body, and after it contacts the cells in this corpus luteum, they start producing the progesterone and the estrogen. So this is kind of pie of the hormones. So first we have the gonadotropin stimulating or gonadotropin releasing hormone. Then we have the FSH and the LH, which will go to the gonads.
And what about the decrease of these hormones, like in the last phase of cycle?
So just because the fertilization did not happen, so the implantation of the fertilized egg is not happened. The fertilized egg usually kind of secretes a lot of factors that will control the corpus luteum. And if these factors are absent, so this corpus luteum, it will receive the command to shrink and just die. So in this case, the levels of estrogen and progesterone, they will drop, and it will happen in the last days of the period. Outside of these hormones, we have a lot of biologically active molecules that can be assumed to be the hormones, but they don't have this general effect. That's why we don't call these stuff hormones, but they are being produced. And this everything, all this mixture of these factors and hormones, they usually control each other. So they have the crosstalk between each other. And in this case, one cell might receive the signal to start production of these hormones or other active molecules, or they can receive the signal to stop the production. So this is a very fine controlling or fine tuning of the system. And if we have a little disturbance from the outside, this everything can be really mixed and get to the disorders. That's why we say that people, parents who give their children hormones, they do not bring any benefits if it's not needed. So a lot of people in late 90s, they were giving children the vitamins with the hormone of the growth. So the growth hormone controls the length of the body parts, and also it stimulates the production of muscles and of other stuff. And they were thinking that they help their children to grow, and it would actually disturb everything in the organism. So it led to a lot of problems with health in the people who are from that period of time. So I know about 5 people who now are kind of bound to the consumption of the hormones from the outside, because their own cells, when they receive these growth hormones, they kind of stopped the production of the related hormones, and now they need to uptake them from the outside. So again, it's a very tightly controlled stuff. So playing with it is very dangerous.
I have one question. It's about testosterone. In the previous lecture, it was said that it is immunosuppressive. And my question is how it is. Does it mean that when we secrete testosterone, our immune system becomes weaker?
So again, one hormone, it can start. So if we give this testosterone to the person, their immune system will become weaker because we disturb the hormone levels. Okay, so everything is related to the disturbance of the hormone levels or healthy hormone levels. And if we bring some unhealthy levels, of course, we kind of mix the parts of the organism that are related to the functioning of this hormone. So if the person does not take the testosterone from the outside, so it only relies on the testosterone that is produced by their body, it is all fine. So there is no immunosuppressive effect, etc. But if we administer the testosterone, because of the excess of the testosterone inside the body, the immune system will go down in the response to the infections, etc. Okay.
Okay. So extremely high level of testosterone is harmful, right?
So the disturbed level, I would say.
Okay, I got it. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. That's why, for example, the lupus disorder is related to the puberty of women, because all of a sudden, just imagine that a child does not have these huge spikes of the estrogen and progesterone. And at about 12 to 13 years, they start producing a lot of these hormones, so immunostimulating hormones. And at some time, it might become very kind of harmful for the body of the girl because they produce too much. So during the first periods, the levels of hormones are kind of unstable, and it is kind of the same or equal to taking the hormones from the outside. And it might be related to the overstimulation of the immune system. And because of that, it starts attacking own cells, leading to the lupus.
May I ask you a bit of like a silly question? So I heard a theory that in several million years, there's a possibility of male species disappearing because of the content of the Y chromosome, that it mutates over the time and it becomes less and less like in quantity, I guess, the chromosome, because the similar thing happened in like a isolated tribe, and we had to externally regulate the level of the number of males born. So do you think it's possible, like maybe in several million years, that male species could disappear?
So since we cannot cancel the natural selection, we are dependent on the natural selection. So it will not let this stuff happen. And as far as I remember, this stuff about degrading Y chromosome is more related to some studies that say that we can initiate this process with the disturbance of the genome of the human. And I guess that nature, if we are still under the pressure of the evolution, nature will not let us kind of get rid of the males, because with the number of males going down, it will mean that number of all children will also go down, and in this case, the number of females will also kind of get decreased. So I don't think that somehow we can escape the evolution pressure.
But wasn't it like proven that, well, it's not possible yet, but wasn't it like proven that females can get pregnant from like bone marrow? I don't know how that process happens. This is all like sort of speculative news, but the theory is really interesting.
But it's again not natural, right? So
yes,
if we have this IVF, of course it is possible, and usually we have more girls than boys after the IVF, and it usually happens because the male embryos, they are more prone to premature dying because it's in general weaker than the female embryo. And of course, because of that, we kind of have this skew towards the females in the IVF. But if we talk about the natural ways of the reproduction, then it shouldn't happen at all, because otherwise the whole species will go to the degradation, or involution. And in this case, the whole species is kind of doomed. So if we're talking about the natural stuff, it shouldn't happen because the nature doesn't work like that.